Senator Kennedy has been shot. Is that possible? Is that possible? It could. Is it possible, ladies and gentlemen? It is possible. He has. Not only Senator Kennedy. Oh, my God. Senator Kennedy has been shot. And another man, a Kennedy campaign manager, and possibly shot in the head.
My name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? Alright, welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? HDTH. I am your host, Richard Dix, and this is episode 85 coming at you. We're going to talk about RFK and his assassination. It's one that I definitely did not know much about going into. I think I mentioned that a couple episodes ago. This was the one where I think I learned, I learned the most. It's the saddest, I would almost say, because, I don't know, just because we find that he died, 2 months after MLK dies. His brother's already been murdered. The situation compounds in a way that, the events hadn't really taken place to make possible for the earlier ones. But yeah, we're going to get into it. We're going to find out all the things about it, who did it, maybe why. As always, there's always conspiracy theories around these things. But yeah, so before we get into it, of course, find all the episode extras over at hthappen.com. All the socials are at hthappen, except for TikTok, which is at hthappen22. We're doing big things over there. It's doing probably the best social network that this podcast has. We have a Twitter, we have an Instagram, we have a Facebook, we even have a Tumblr. You can find it. It's out there somewhere. But the TikTok seems to be doing the best. You can find clips of the podcast up there, usually with mostly the same audio. Sometimes I slip in some different audio if I can find something that maybe didn't work for the podcast itself. I'll try to put it with the extras and the promos. You find podcast clips with videos that kind of it's usually the muted videos of what I've watched to find information about the particular figure or topic that we're discussing. But definitely check it out. It's doing pretty well. Let's see. Of course, Bite Size Bios is doing great. We every other week we cover somebody from history, and it's been going in hand with the 40s to 70s series we've been covering for the last few months here. And I do want to mention that since we're on the topic. I've been trying to figure out. I know where we're going next as far as with the podcast. Like I figured it out about a month or two ago. I don't want to stay in this. This is not a podcast about the 60s. This is not a podcast about the 40s. This is just a podcast where we find out how things happen. And I happen to have picked a series from 30 years. 30 year span. I don't know why I couldn't say that. I don't know why that was eluding me. But so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cover what are considered to be some of the most important points of the 20th century. And I'm saying that now because I want you to be thinking about it. Maybe if you want to submit something to any of these socials and let us know what you consider to be what I'm going to call pivotal moments of the 20th century. And we're going to discuss in a similar way, in the vein of the podcast, how they happened, but how they really did change history and how they would foreshadow things that will come in the future. Things that, we were kind of moving right along one way, and then we realized, we can't live like that anymore because of whatever's happened. You find that all throughout society, all throughout history. But that's kind of what's happened. I say that to say we have about another month, maybe two, of the 40s and 70s. I got a couple things I want to cover that are just kind of buttoning things up. We're still going to talk about the civil rights movement. We're going to talk about I think we're going to talk about Woodstock, the moon landing, maybe one or two other things. And then we're going to go ahead and land this plane and move on to the next thing. Like I said, covering the people from the 40s and 70s right now. The last little bit of housekeeping before we get out here, of course, what am I watching? I just watched Serpico, which I'll be completely honest because I read the book years ago in college. And I was pronounced because I never heard it. When you read a book, you don't hear, no one's reading it to you. You pronounce some words how you think they're pronounced. And for the longest time, I called this man Serpico, right? And I remember a friend of mine correcting me. He was a little bit older than me. He's like, "You sure it's not Serpico?" And I'm like, "No, man, it's Serpico. Like, it's got to be Serpico. It's Serpico." Anybody's wondering out there, but it's a great story. The movie stars Al Pacino. It's made in 1978, I want to say, and it's about this man who joins the New York Police Department in the 50s, I think, and just kind of experiences the widespread corruption that is just happening. It's prevalent. It's in your face. As soon as he joins the force, literally they just start handing him money, right? Like, here's your cut, from being dirty. And he's like, "I don't want the money." And they're like, "You don't want the what?" This guy don't want the money. This guy's got, he's weird. He's the weird one. right? And so, and truthfully, he was never out to snitch on his buddies. You know, he just was like, I don't live like that, so I'm not taking the dough, right? But that really rubbed his colleagues the wrong way, and that's kind of the whole thing. And he ends up going forward over, because he ends up, I think, serving in the NYPD for like 15 years, but he ends up exposing all the corruption towards the end because he just can't take it anymore. He works for years to try to do it in like a nice way, I guess, but these guys don't really want the thin blue line. They don't want their corruption exposed. But definitely check that out. That's good. That's a book, like I said, I read years ago, but I watched the movie. The movie was on Paramount Plus. It was on Paramount Plus. Give that a look. What am I listening to? And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, this initial subject used to be what am I reading? And I'm not listening to too much different. Always the JRE, but what am I reading? I have read 3 books by Michael Lewis in the last month and a half. Right, about the last 45 days, I have been consumed with this man's literature. He writes a good book. It's the only way to put it. He can break things down and make things palatable in a way that I don't think. I mean, I really can't say anybody else. Maybe Ken Burns, but I feel like their art is different in the way they present topics. And the 3 books, of course, if you're wondering, was The Fifth Risk, which is about Trump and the way his initial administration handled coming into the presidency, basically, and how all the different government agencies were just kind of dumbfounded, or just they were left dumbfounded by the way that Trump's cabinet was handling things. And they go into talk about the different risks that America faces from abroad, I guess you could say, or even domestically. And then there was Boomerang, which is the story of Europe's version of the housing crisis, or the things that led up to. Not necessarily the exact. It usually kind of goes from like 2002 to 2007 as far as what they talk about. But it's really good. They cover countries like Greece and Germany, Iceland. Was there one more? There was one more, but I'm forgetting it. But yeah, that's pretty good. And of course, The Blind Side. I had to read The Blind Side because all the stuff that was happening was coming up right now. I need to know if you haven't heard about it. The player from The Blind Side is I don't know if he's suing the I think he's suing his would-be parents, quote unquote parents, because they lied to him, or that's his version. Who knows? I mean, it does seem that way, but I wasn't there. They were said to have adopted him, but they really just put him in a conservatorship. Looking at you, Britney Spears, and now he's realizing that he might have missed out on some money. He might have missed out on a bag because the story was so, lucrative, and also because of the way the story was told. He was said, that throughout his life, people always thought he was dumb, and that's something that he's been having to fight since the movie came out. But the book is good. The book is good. I watched the movie after just because you got to do that, and it's god awful. I'm not sure how to, but I mean, in like a retrospect way, like I think we were all cool with that in like 2005 or whenever it came out, 2009. But you look at it and you're just like, man, that's more than likely not how it happened. Like I don't know, I don't really know what happened. And I read the book and it's not really like, even the book. It's like it makes you wonder. It's like the book is way more realistic than the movie. Obviously, the movie that's not normal, or that's normal for most books, in comparison to movies. But you just like the facts were there. This is a true story. They didn't have to make up half the stuff that they made up. They could have. It's just tell the story. Like there was a part in there where in the book he just goes back to his old like neighborhood for a second to talk to some friends, and that's just what happens in the book. Simple, nothing. It's a conversation. In the movie, it's a shootout with 40s and gangs and gangsters and everything. And I'm watching this just losing faith in Hollywood, because I'm just like, we all read the same book. We all read the same source material. Where did you see the 40s and the gangbangers? There were none. And so I'm just like, the story was there. His life happened. You didn't have to embellish it, especially in a negative way, but I don't know. So that's what I'm reading. I'm not sure what's next. I am currently in the middle of a book by Rachel Maddow about big oil, which is really interesting. I can't remember the name of it right now. Oh, Blowout. Yeah, it's called Blowout. But yeah, so that's it. Gonna get out of here before I get to rambling too long. We're gonna get on to RFK and tell you about his assassination. As I always say, give us 5 stars wherever you find this. 2 stars if you didn't like it. 5 stars if you loved it. If you didn't love it, tell us why you didn't love it, because constructive criticism is always welcome. And yeah, without further ado, as we know what to do, here is the episode.
I heard a balloon pop, and I said to some woman, I said, what a terrible thing to have around here. These sounds, I said, it's not good for another Kennedy. And the woman said, don't be silly. And that's when I realized it wasn't a balloon.
On June 5th, 1968, Robert F. Kennedy was shot by Sirhan, at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California. He was pronounced dead the following day. Kennedy, a United States Senator and candidate in the 1968 Democratic Party presidential primaries, had just won the California and South Dakota primaries the day before. He addressed his campaign supporters in the Ambassador Hotel's Embassy Ballroom, and after leaving the podium, he exited through the kitchen hallway, where he was mortally wounded by multiple shots, once again fired by Sirhan, which I want to say, in my opinion, this man's name is Sirhan or Sirhan. I don't know. I've heard it pronounced like 5 different ways, but Sirhan sounds like, I guess, the best way. I don't know. Those are the facts. That's what's out there. We're going to talk about how did that happen. We're going to dig as deep as we can into RFK's assassination and try to tell you what really happened. This is, of course, our third assassination of the 60s, second of 1968. All the Ks we've covered. Like I've said before, if you had a K in your name in the 60s, you were probably getting shot. And now, we're doing RFK. JFK was in 63, covered his assassination. And we'll find with this, I don't think it's as much conspiracy as there was surrounding JFK's or even MLK's. I think what the interesting kicker we find here is that the man who murdered him was Palestinian. And this goes almost too well hand in hand with the series that we're covering right now. If you've been listening to the podcast, of course, is the Israel-Hamas conflict in the 40s to 70s specifically, which is why I thought this was pertinent to bring up. He was doing this in defense of his homeland.
I suppose that it came to the fore when I began to focus on it.
This is Sirhan speaking to Inside Edition in 1989.
Erupted as soon after the 1967 war, where the Arabs had lost and the Israelis won. And my anger at the American people's reaction to the loss of the Palestinians and the Arabs.
From what I understand, RFK had a pro-Israel stance, and so he had heard this and on TV, I think, months prior, and had started to kind of, I got to find this guy, I got to kill this guy. So that's the bullet points. But of course, as we do here, we're gonna break it down. So number one, why was he there? Right? Why was RFK in California? Why was he at the Ambassador's Hotel? As we said, he had just won a California primary.
Mayor Yorty has just sent me a message that we've been here too long already. So, my thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you, guys.
Now, after a long time of thinking about it, Kennedy had decided to run for president. Right? This is before. In the previous election, the people had wanted him to be Johnson's running mate. They wanted him to be the VP to LBJ's P. But if you know anything about the Johnsons and Kennedys, they are quite literally oil and water. Right? They don't like each other. One does not appreciate the other's positive attributes. So he chose not to. He said, no, I'm good. Thank you, sir. I'm going to go into Congress. And that's what he does. He runs for Senate and he wins the Senate. While he's in Congress, he basically opposes everything LBJ has to stand for. If LBJ says the sky is blue, RFK says the sky is red, and vice versa. And so he comes out, basically everyone's realizing, the guy that we wanted to run with LBJ they don't even have any of the same ideas. One in particular being the Vietnam War. They had differing ideas on that. And so people have been asking him, of course, when the next election comes around, will you run? Are you going to run, Senator Kennedy? And he was really not, right? He said he wasn't going to run for a while. And this is what you find, and this is, I don't know, I think it's still odd. Even today, we talk about modern politics. He threw his hat in the ring only, 5 months, I think, 7 months before the actual election, which is, I'm not sure if that was customary during that time as far as the timeline, but I mean, it just seems wild now because he had been asked beforehand, in the months leading up.
I am announcing today my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. I do not run for the presidency merely to oppose any man, but to propose new policies. I run because I am convinced that this country is on a perilous course, and because I have such strong feelings about what must be done, and I feel that I'm obliged to do all that I can.
If you listen to the podcast 2 HDTHs ago, the very opening clip of the podcast is RFK telling some people that MLK has been shot, been gunned down in Memphis. And it's interesting, to know that was, I would say, probably the catalyst that made him be like, I've got to do this. I've got to try, because I don't think he was going to. I can't speak for RFK. I definitely can't. But I don't know. It can seem like an insurmountable thing to try to change anything, anything that's large and in the works already. Any machine that's already in movement, right? It's hard to make that go a different direction. And I think you can become disillusioned, especially if that machine kills your brother, right? And has killed other people that you saw as allies in your, in your cause, in your plight. It can be very disheartening. And that's what I think he felt before Dr. King lost his life. So, kind of giving you the lead up to the California primary. This is the stuff that gets us in the ballroom, right? And so, as I said, the California presidential primary elections were held on June the 4th, 1968. Statewide results gave Kennedy 46% to McCarthy's 42%. He also won, as we said, the South Dakota primary that same time. And so what we get, of course, the primary happens, we're happy, yada, yada, we're partying the night away. He gives his campaign, speech to say, we just won California, and we definitely have it here for you. You definitely hear it, because the best audio of this entire thing is because basically they were running the cameras from his ballroom speech when he gets shot. So at approximately 12:02 a.m., Kennedy addressed his campaign supporters in the Ambassador's Hotel's Embassy Ballroom in mid-Wilshire, Los Angeles. At the time, the government did not provide Secret Service protection for presidential candidates. I'm sure that would change after this. So, why was he there? This is why he was there, right? California primary in Los Angeles. What happened? That's the next question. What happened the night of the shooting? So, Kennedy didn't have a very robust security personnel. Wasn't a lot going on there. He had a former FBI agent, a man by the name of William Barry, and two unofficial bodyguards, which I found this to be funny when you looked at it. Two Olympic gold medalists. He just found two big guys and was like, hey, can you just watch my six for me, if you don't mind? Two guys by the name of Rayford Johnson and Rosie Greer. One was a decathlete, the other was a football player. So at approximately 12:10 a.m., concluding his victory speech, Kennedy was said, and I quote, "So my thanks to all of you, and on to Chicago, and let's win there," end quote. And so here kind of starts the controversy, maybe the conspiracy, is that they had made a quick change in his planned exit, in his exit plan. I'm not sure where he was supposed to go before, but they had immediately when he walked off stage, they were like, oh, cut through the kitchen, which would prove to be fatal for him. Kennedy planned to walk through the ballroom after speaking on his way to another gathering of supporters, is what it's saying here, but reporters wanted a press conference. His campaign aide, Fred Dutton, decided that Kennedy would forego the second gathering and instead go through the hotel's kitchen and pantry area behind the ballroom to the press area. So that's what it was. He was trying to get to a second press conference, or an actual press conference for his previous speech, which is like, how much more press could we do? You know what I mean? You just gave a speech. You want to do a speech in your speech? But Kennedy, he welcomed contact with the public during the campaign. People often tried to touch him in excitement, which is like, to me, I would be the opposite. But I guess, he felt that he had to. But that was truthfully what proved to be the reason for his brother's demise. I mean, if you remember from the episode we talked about, when they went on that campaign trail, in Dallas, they gave explicit instructions to the Secret Service to stay further back from them, to make them seem more personable, to make them seem more approachable, right? So that they would seem like humans. So people would, more humane or whatever, more down to earth than the people they see on TV and their newspapers. But that's literally what got him killed, riding around in a convertible in Dallas. Maybe don't do that. And so his brother, he felt the same way. So Barry and Dutton, they began clearing a way for Kennedy to go through the kitchen. But he was hemmed in by the crowd. But he would end up getting ushered through. And he was kind of being held with this guy named Euchre, kind of guiding him through. But he kept stopping because he kept talking to people, shaking hands, all this stuff. And he stopped to shake hands with this man named Juan Romero.
I remember extending my hand as far as I could.
This is Juan Romero. He was a busboy at the Ambassador Hotel.
And then I remember him shaking my hand. And as he let go, somebody shot him.
Just then, Saran stepped down from a low tray stacker. They said he'd been standing on some sort of like tray of meals, or if you've ever been to like a hotel or a hospital, somewhere, they have those big stacked trays of meals that they have, and they say he was standing on one of those because he was a very small guy, very small man. He's Sirhan Sirhan was about 5'1", 5'2", would actually try to make his living as a horse jockey, that small. But he jumps off this meal tray thing here right when Juan Romero is shaking hands with him, and he repeatedly fires an 8-shot, 22 long rifle caliber Ivor Johnson Cadet 55A revolver.
I kneeled onto him and put my hand between the cold concrete and his head just to make him comfortable. I could see his lips moving, so I put my ear next to his lips, and I heard him say, "Is everybody okay?" I said, "Yes, everybody's okay." I could feel the steady stream of blood coming through my fingers. I had a rosary in my shirt pocket, and I took it out, thinking that he would need it a lot more than me. I wrapped it around his right hand, and then they wheeled him away.
Of course, now this is where some more conspiracy comes in, is of course they say there was a second shooter. And if you've literally followed any of the podcasts, and if you listen to all of them about these guys, every single one of these assassinations comes along with the fabled second shooter. Oh, he shot him, but also I heard some shots from over there, in JFK's, it's the grassy knoll, right? In MLK, it's the bushes between old Bessie's, boarding house and the Lorraine Motel. Here, it's theoretically some guy on the other side of him crouched down. It's like, you want to believe it? You don't want to believe it, but it's like, why do people believe it? I guess is a better question. Is more of what I'm trying to say. It's just like, why in every instance is there just some guy also hanging out ready to shoot somebody? It's not an average thing, but you do have to wonder. It does make you wonder. So back to the situation, back to the scene at hand. Our little man, Sirhan Sirhan, jumps off the little meal tray thing, right? Pops off 8 shots. Shoots a bunch of people, not just RFK. Shoots RFK like 3 times, I think. He gets shot in the head. I think, let's see if we have it here. He was hit 3 times. Right, there we go. And 5 other people were wounded. And there was a great picture, which will definitely be on the website, which shows him laying there. And it actually shows Juan Romero still tending to him. It's a good picture. I don't know a better way to say it. You could look at it for a long time.
The next day, I decided to go to school. I didn't want to think about it. But this woman was reading the newspaper, and you could see my picture in there with the senator on the floor. She turned around and showed me the picture and says, "This is you, isn't it?" And I remember looking at my hands, and there was dry blood in between my nails.
But yeah, he lets off these shots. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, 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 bang. Was that 8? I'm not sure. The question is, did he shoot 8? He shot 8, they say. And he hits these people. And we have, like I said, the footage, because the cameras never stop rolling once RFK walks off the stage from his primary victory speech. There's a lot of, because there's, they're celebrating, they're hooting and hollering, they're doing hip hip parade, we want RFK, all this stuff. They're doing all that. And then you can hear, if you watch it, I tried to get the actual moment where like the crowd notices, but there's no real, there's an audible shift, but you don't hear the gunshots. So I didn't think it was almost maybe, a point to put it in here, but I do have where they actually apprehend the guy, where they get Sirhan, and it's very interesting. I'll play it for you now.
I am right here. Rafer Johnson has a hold of a man who apparently has fired the shot. That's it, Rafer. Get it. Get the gun, Rafer. Okay, now hold on to the guy. Hold on to him. Hold on to him, ladies and gentlemen. Hold him. Hold him. We don't want another Oswald. Hold him, Rafer. We don't want another Oswald. Hold him, Rafer. Keep people away from him. Keep people away from him. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
And people were kept away from him, and the police have him in custody.
So yeah, like I said, they apprehend him. People hold him down. As you can hear, that was a very just chaotic scene. I mean, that guy was screaming, "Get him, Rafer! Get him! Hold him, Rafer! Hold him!" And it's interesting that he mentions literally, his RFK's brother. We don't need another Oswald. And it's very interesting to hear these guys. I mean, I don't know. I thought it was a very interesting clip there. But so the question is, now that we've covered the why was he there, right? We've covered the actual the shooting itself, which we'll get into more in the actual breaking down the logistics of what happened in a little bit. But the question is, now we can maybe dig into a little bit of who did the shooting. Who is Sirhan Sirhan?
Police later identified the alleged assailant as 24-year-old Sirhan Sirhan, a native Jordanian who came to this country 11 years ago. Sirhan's brother Adel is said to have given the name to police. Fingerprints later confirmed that identification. Among the things discovered in a search of Sirhan's personal effects was a newspaper clipping criticizing Senator Kennedy's support of United States aid to Israel, and a notebook with scribbled lines saying Kennedy must be killed before June 5th.
Okay, we can't pass over the fact that man has a brother named Adele. That's pretty cool. My brother's not named Adele. He's not named after any famous pop singer, I don't think. No. He is, however, named after the white girl from those Rocky movies. So, Sirhan Bishara Sirhan, right? Born March 19th, 1944. He is a Palestinian or Jordanian-born Palestinian man. He was convicted of murdering the American politician RFK. This all happened on June 5th, 1968. Now, I always want to know more about these guys, right? The guys that did the shooting. And like I've said, he's one of the few people, I guess not maybe the few, because if you think about it, I was going to say, because James Earl Ray lived for a while, right? Of course, we lose Lee Harvey Oswald, but this guy lives for a long time. But we'll dig into his motives a little bit. So Sirhan Sirhan was quoted by the British journalist David Frost, very good guy, as saying, quote, "My only connection with Robert Kennedy was his sole support of Israel in his deliberate attempt to send those 50 fighter jets to Israel to obviously do harm to the Palestinians," end quote. So this guy, I think he had heard on television or read the newspaper. I thought I heard that saw it on television that this was something that John F. Kennedy, that RFK was planning to do. And so this is when the seed gets planted for him to be like, that guy's got to die. I got to kill me some RFK. You know what I mean? And he would kind of he spent the next few months, just kind of planning that. And what's interesting, like I've said before, with the connection with what we're doing right now, with the Israel-Hamas conflict, is, some scholars believe that this assassination was the first major incidence of political violence in the U.S. that was stemming from the actual Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is the first time that we've had some issues abroad spill over domestically from this particular incident. It was said that Sirhan carried out the attack on the first anniversary of the Arab-Israeli war. So, I mean, like I was saying before, even talking about when they came in on October the 7th, a lot of these wars, they're fought. These guys don't forget. They go in. It's symbolic to them. Like I said, I mean, this is a man that's fighting for his homeland in a way. Whether you agree with it or not, those were his motives.
And when the Palestinian Arabs were forced to evacuate and be expelled from their homes and lands to accommodate the new arrivals, the new Jewish arrivals in Palestine, I feel that having experienced what I have experienced in Palestine, atrocities, the killings, the violence, and just the uprooting of massive populations, it did have an impact on me, I suppose, more than it did on others. By saying this, I'm not trying to discount the seriousness of the killing.
So interesting to point out, even though he is from Jordan and is a Palestinian, he was born into an Arab Palestinian Christian family. They lived in mandatory Palestine, which of course we've talked about if you've been listening to the podcast, was what was created by the British when they took Palestine from the Ottoman Empire. They made it the British mandated Palestine. That's where he was from. This is all very serious to him. It's all very close to home for him. And he was said to have, by his mother, to have been traumatized by the conflicts, by the Arab-Israeli conflict, specifically the different wars we've covered. If you haven't listened to it, you should go check it out. We've done 3 parts already on the Israel-Hamas conflict. We got a part 4 coming, I think, in a couple weeks. We're really trying to break it down. But he lived in America for a while. His family moved from Palestine to California, New York. He lived around. Ended up, I think he went to Pasadena City College. And while he was out here, he tried to, like I said before, he tried to make a living as a jockey. He's a small man. They have it here as 5'5". You can look at his booking photo, his mugshot. I don't know if he's 5'5". I don't know if that measurement, I don't know if that ruler's saying 5'5". But so he would try to make a living as a jockey. He would end up going from a regular Christian to being Baptist, and even Seventh-day Adventists. It's interesting because I would have never thought, if you told me before this, without doing the research, that a man named Saran, who's a Jordanian Palestinian who lives in British Mandated Palestine, is a Christian, I would have said, no, sir, you're lying. No, sir, that must not be true. Have you read the entire book or article? Well, I have. Man's a Christian. It's wild. So that's Saran. Talked about why he did it. Large connection to, the Arab-Israeli war. What happened to him, right? He was sentenced to death, but his sentence was commuted to life in prison due to a court decision in California that happened in 1972. He's still alive today. He goes up for parole all the time, but they sent him back down. As recently as 2022, his parole was denied by current California Governor Gavin Newsom, who said he doesn't seem to have what it takes to be a good addition to society. I'm paraphrasing. Now, we've talked about RFK. We've talked about the murder, right? We've talked about Saran. Now, we'll talk about the conspiracies. And of course, they abound, right? They're everywhere. The one that I think is probably, it's pretty innocuous, but it seems like we said, the same way there's always seems to be a second shooter, the same way there's always just some other guy around just ready to pop off when all these famous people are getting murdered, right? There's always some random CIA guys just hanging out. And they see them here too. There's like 2 CIA guys who are just like, why are they there? Why? I mean, and it's, honestly, it's not good. If I'm ever famous, and you hear this, and wherever I'm at, there's CIA people there, like, know that that's a problem. Know that I'm not okay with it. And I have nothing wrong with the CIA. It's just like they move a little, they kill people. Like, we've been on the record here in the last at least 3 months with probably like double-digit bodies racked up by the CIA throughout the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. I mean, literally, the name of their precursor was surprise, kill, vanish. That's what the CIA came from. So, yeah, it's safe to say the CIA scares me. And so, theoretically, in that idea with the CIA guys, one of those people, one of those CIA guys is the second gunman, which, Occam's razor, it seems like it's probably the simplest idea. I mean, at this point, they're getting cocky, right? At this point, they murdered JFK, right? At this point, they've killed MLK, right? And they're probably, as we know, if you listened to the last episode, plotting on killing MLK's brother, because he, in a little bit more than a year, will be found at the bottom of his own swimming pool. Like I said, if you haven't checked that out, go back to episode 83. It's worth a listen. Now, it's interesting that RFK Jr., current presidential candidate, is on the record as also saying he doesn't believe that Saran killed his father either. Isn't it interesting that we have these high-profile assassinations, and the children of both RFK and MLK have come out and said they don't think the men that the world has said killed their fathers. Coincidence? You be the judge. I'm not so sure. I don't know. Saran. He seems pretty straightforward, in his motives. There have been people who said the same thing about that happened to him that also happened to Jack Ruby. They said that they've been said that when they found him, he was like his brain was like he was kind of out of it, right? He didn't know where he was. He could have possibly been brainwashed. And of course, we've covered this extensively on the podcast as well. We've talked about the stuff the CIA was doing with brainwashing in the 60s, which is why that's also not that crazy. And I think when you look at it all in retrospect, it almost seems inevitable that they were going to kill his brother too, especially with the way he was moving. Now, if his brother just left his attorney general post in 63 or 64, actually, because he stayed on after his brother was killed with LBJ's administration for the last, year, I think. If he had just left that, right, went back to his beach house in Massachusetts, right, just done some real waspy stuff. Well, he's a Catholic. But, just done some stuff like that. I don't think the CIA would have messed with him, right? But this guy, right, they just killed his brother, just murdered your brother in cold blood, blew his head off in downtown Dallas. And what do? You run for Congress. Oh, you run for Congress. You want to be a senator. You want to change things. No, sir. Oh, you want to be president? You're running for president? Okay. Yeah, no. Hold my beer. I mean, that's what I think the CIA did. I don't know, and of course, I watched videos, and I'm not going to put you through it because there's the people who break down the logistics of how Saran could not have shot him. Those videos exist. They're on YouTube. But I think, like I said, you can look at it and say maybe the simplest answer is possibly, just the truth. Okay, RFK. Okay, RFK. He is dead. That's not okay. Like I said in the beginning, it's to me the saddest one, but also the one that I think gets the least coverage. But the one, like I even just mentioned here before the podcast, and that it seems so ripe to happen when you look at all of it. Not even in retrospect. I mean, yeah, obviously in retrospect because hindsight's 20/20. But I can imagine if you look at it during that time. I mean, even Jackie O knew. That's why she left after this, or it might even been before. I need to look. I'm not sure, because she felt like her family was under attack, because literally they were, by the government. Like, and it's remarkable that, like, I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and we were talking about like how all of this is possible, that they were just doing all of this I don't know, subversive, espionage, this subterfuge right in front of America's eyes, and they just thought they'd never have to be held accountable for it. And I think we lived in a different world back then, and the level of scrutiny that events and topics, anything when the world truthfully was not, I don't think, to what it is now. And everything now is under a magnifying glass. Everything is broken down to its foundation. If by somebody, not by everybody, really, and not by 51% of people, but still enough people, and they do it and they post it for everybody else. So we live in a world where you analyze everything. We didn't live in that world back then. So I feel like they didn't foresee the amount of research and like I said, scrutiny that would be applied to these events. But yeah, I mean, that was RFK. Give us 5 stars if you liked it, 2 stars if you didn't. Tell us why you didn't, because of course constructive criticism is always welcome. You can find us at the socials at htthappen.com is the website. The only different social is at htthappen22, which goes of course to TikTok. Give that a check out, guys. They got some good things going on over there. People who are not, and if you found this podcast from TikTok, thank you. That's another way. I'm just trying to find another way to get people to find out what we're doing over here, find out how things are happening. But yeah, I don't think there's much else to say. So I'll see you guys next week with the next bite-sized bio.
Each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. If Athens shall appear great to you, said Pericles, consider then that her glories were purchased by valiant men, and by men who learned their duty. That is the source of all greatness in all societies, and it is the key to progress in our time.